And
Hang on.
hi.
Hang on.
Okay.
Sorry. Now we're live.
Great. Thanks, John. Hi, everybody. My name is Chad Lupkes, and I'm a progressive activist in Seattle, Washington. I have been working within and around the Democratic Party and progressive politics in Washington State since 2003. And I've done a lot of reading and ranting about politics and economics over these last 12 years. We've been through a lot over the last 15 years, but our nation's history goes back 234 years. Okay. And of course, I had YouTube running, so I'm going to catch up to where I was. We've been through a lot over the last 15 years, but our nation's history goes back 234 years. So we've got a lot of catching up to do. There it is. And while the term progressive might not have come into our language until the late 1800s, we've always been here as progressives. My goal for this series of shows is to introduce all of the voters and the activists who are just now getting engaged and excited by the Bernie Sanders campaign into the existing political infrastructure in our country. There are a great number of organizations in the United States that have been working hard over the last few years, over the last few decades, to support progressive candidates from the U.S. president all the way down to local city council. My hope is that if the Bernie grassroots is introduced to these organizations, they will be able to find an answer to the ongoing questions, how can I get involved? And how can I make a difference in my community? Because Bernie Sanders is 100% right when he says he can't do this alone. We are all in this together, and we have work to do. We have to work together, learn together, and act together to create lasting change. I'm joined today by Charles Chamberlain, the Executive Director of Democracy for America. Democracy for America was started by former Vermont Governor Howard Dean in early 2004, and it grew out of his unsuccessful presidential campaign that had worked and built itself into a powerhouse during the 2003 and 2004 presidential cycle. Charles originally joined DFA in 2006 as political director, where he led issue-based campaigns for the public option in healthcare and against telecom immunity for spying on Americans, as well as worked on endorsements for some controversial progressive primary candidates, like those who ran against Senator Joe Lieberman, Senator Blanche Lincoln, and Representative Al Wynn. He also directed DFA's successful campaign to stop the Republican war on working families in Wisconsin and Ohio. In January of 2012, Charles became the executive director of Progressive Congress, which is the foundation for the Congressional Progressive Caucus. That's the caucus that Bernie Sanders started in 1991. Charles rejoined DFA as the executive director in August of 2013, and he leads the strategic direction of the DFA team. Charles, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. So I've got a list of prepared questions that I wanted to ask, and then I was thinking we could get into audience participation. So first off, why don't you introduce yourself beyond what I just said? What else have you been doing?
Well, you know, actually, my relationship with Democracy for America and our members goes further back than 2006. Actually, the first day I started working, I would say, with DFA was March 13th in 2003, when me and 11 other people just showed up at a coffee shop in Miami Beach, Florida, to discuss what we were going to do to try to elect Howard Dean president. And that was the founding sort of meeting for Miami for Dean, which is the group that formed into becoming Democracy for America Miami once Democracy for America was created after the presidential run. So I feel like, for me, I go all the way back to 2003 with this stuff.
I was going to, but I had something called chemotherapy to deal with. So I was a little distracted, but that's fine.
Pretty glad you did that. Probably sounds like a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I spent the 6 months researching politics in Washington State, trying to figure out how things did work, and then I started also trying to figure out how things should work, and I've been working on that ever since.
You
So
know,
one
the
of the
first
first
time I
things.
met you, Chad, actually was in 2006, right after I became, not long after I became political director. I came out to, if you probably remember this, to work on Darcy Berner's campaign for the last 6 weeks of her 2006 campaign, and I remember I met you there at that, and I've always been impressed with your work, Chad. It's exciting to see you still involved almost 10 years later and continuing to do fantastic work.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about what this is a little later, but yeah, I've been through a lot, and I've learned a lot. So one of the first things that I wanted to show the audience and I wanted to talk to you about was the presidential candidate poll that Democracy for America did earlier this year. John, can we bring that up on the screen?
Yep.
So this is a poll that went through, and it looks like it was a ranked choice voting or instant runoff poll where people could rank their preferences for potential presidential candidates. Is that right?
Sort of. What you could do is you picked your top 3 candidates, including you could write somebody in.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And then basically the way we released the results was that we released the main page of results was releasing everybody's first choice votes. But if you see how the page works, you can actually, I can't see it at the moment while we're on the screen here, but if you see how the page works, you can click next to names and you can remove candidates from the listing. And when you do that, it will take that, let's say you remove Elizabeth Warren, then it will show you where all of Elizabeth Warren's second choice votes go. And one of the things that we really like about doing this is it gives people a really good idea of how things could shake out as a primary goes along, longer and longer. A great example of this is that in 2007 when we did this, it was exciting poll and it was really interesting, but it continued to be exciting as the primary went on because you could pull candidates out. When it became just Obama and Hillary, it was really interesting to see that DFA members fell pretty evenly. I think it was 52-48. Which actually matched very much what sort of the whole primary electorate ended up being by the end. Yet that was nowhere near what it was in the original vote. In the original vote, Hillary Clinton only got 5% of the vote, for example.
Wow. Okay. So it looks like John was able to get that up on the screen, right?
Yes, took me a minute. Sorry about that. It's up, guys.
No worries. Okay, so as you can see, and I'm going to go there now on my own screen, if Elizabeth Warren got 42%, and that's why you and Move On launched the Run Warren Run campaign, correct?
Yeah, that's. I mean, that is. I wouldn't say that's the only reason, but absolutely.
Well, not the only reason.
Yeah, but absolutely, that was a leading indicator to us that our members were very interested in seeing Elizabeth Warren get into the race and drafting her. That said, I think it's really relevant to point out, and maybe you're about to point this out, that Bernie Sanders came in second, also beating Hillary Clinton, which to us is a really important indicator that is a classic example of the Democratic establishment not understanding the grassroots, the rank and file, those of us that actually really work to actually get people elected. We need to be sold on a candidate. We don't believe in something as inevitability. And I think a really great example of that is when you have the media frontrunner placing third in our poll.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing that I wanted to show is if we click on Elizabeth Warren's face and take her out of the poll, then Bernie Sanders gets 45.28 and Hillary Clinton gets 32.18. And the reason why I wanted to show that is because a lot of the people that I have seen from the Bernie Sanders grassroots are very much against Hillary Clinton. And I know that DFA members are both inside and outside of the Democratic Party establishment. We always have been. But Hillary Clinton has a lot of support within DFA members, and I just want to point that out. Because one of the other questions that I see coming up for DFA is, when is DFA going to endorse Bernie Sanders? And this might be an indication that maybe an endorsement is not quite something that you need to do yet. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that, and then I'll say something else about it.
Sure, I definitely think that, and we've continued to poll beyond this poll or membership, and we've seen some ups and downs in how the polls go, but generally it actually hasn't changed that much from what you're seeing right here, which is that the majority of DFA members, or rather the largest amount of DFA members, is supportive and pushing for Bernie. But there is a large segment of our membership that supports Hillary, and there's a small section of our membership that supports other candidates or is undecided. The way we look at this is that when it comes to presidential endorsements, this is something when people make the decision as to who they're going to back as a candidate, they make it's different than just any other candidate, because it becomes often their life for the next year or 2 years. They have to go through heated conversations with everybody about everything, and you get very, very committed to your candidate. And so for that, DFA, this is the only endorsement where we have a very specific endorsement threshold that has to be met for us to do it. And that means we have to see a supermajority of our membership support a single candidate before we're going to endorse, because we don't want to alienate half of our membership, for example, by endorsing one candidate over another. When it comes to this important of a position that is nationally relevant to every single person across the country.
Right.
So with that in mind, if we were to do a poll today, we're confident that we would find that our members didn't, there isn't a supermajority of support for one specific candidate, which is a good argument for all the Bernie supporters, all the Hillary Clinton supporters that are out there that would like to see DFA endorse. You need to organize. You need to, reach out and do real work, and hopefully we'll get to a point where one of those candidates can get to a supermajority of support. One more thing, though, Chad, I want to say is just that, on some level, it's a really good thing for DFA not to have endorsed yet. The reality is that we have more power in pressuring the candidates to do a better job, to be top of their game, to turn them into the best candidate possible when we haven't made an endorsement. A great example of this is last week. We've been pressuring for about a month, but we really escalated the pressure last week on Hillary Clinton to endorse Senator Warren and Tammy Baldwin's bill that would eliminate golden parachutes and really help affect the revolving door, Wall Street into administrations and into government. And we pushed her really hard. This week, she came out and endorsed it. Now Bernie and Martin O'Malley, they've been supporting that pretty much since day one. They're already on board. But without by having organizations like ours that haven't yet made an endorsement pressuring Senator Clinton or Secretary Clinton, she had a reason to come out and do something and to engage us, because she wants to make sure she gets our support.
Excellent. Yeah, that is a very good reason. So let's go over some of the history of DFA. I know that Democracy for America was originally launched on March 18th of 2004, and I know this because I was in the room.
Nice.
And
lucky you, I love that.
Yeah, I was there, and when we got done with it, my friend and I, Ray Minshew, kind of looked at each other because we were wondering what we were going to do after the Dean campaign, and we looked at each other and said, okay, here we go, Democracy for Washington. And that's one of the things I was involved in 2006 when you first met me.
Yeah.
And why I was still involved. But when DFA was created, from your perspective on the inside, what was the original purpose?
So, to be clear, when it was created, I was still a grassroots member on the ground leading a local group in Miami, and I had, similar to you, I was frustrated because I was pretty confident that John Kerry couldn't win, and I knew for a fact that I didn't want to go out there and campaign for John Kerry within the John Kerry campaign. I didn't feel like they had their stuff together, that they really knew what they were doing. And so I think, like you, when the announcement was made for the creation of Democracy for America, I was extremely excited that here's going to be a vehicle where I can support the Democratic nominee, but I can do it in my own way, and I can do it with an organization that I really believe in, that understands it and gets it. And the cool thing for me is I feel like we're still that organization in that regard. No matter who the nominee ends up being, but especially if the nominee, you know, I assume the majority of people watching this are Bernie supporters, and if the nominee ends up not being Bernie, one of the things I really want to put out there is that, and to encourage you, that if you still want to try to elect a Democratic nominee after that, you don't have to get on board directly with the campaign. You can get on board with organizations like ours, specifically ours, and we'll help empower you and allow you to do the kind of work you want to do to win in your own way. To answer your question,
and not just for the presidential candidates. I mean, you guys work with the federal, you work with state, you work with local candidates. What are the criteria for the candidates that you do work with?
That's right. That's right. We work. We're one of the few national organizations that endorses not just on the federal level, but we endorse all the way down to school board. We used to love to say from dog catcher to the presidency, because we know that one of the key things that we need to do is to build the farm team that it takes to win, but also the farm team of progressives that are going to be in higher office later. That starts with school boards. It starts with state legislatures. And the more that we can elect people at those levels, the better. I forgot your question, though. I apologize. I don't think that was actually answering your question.
That was pretty much what I wanted to get into.
Okay, good.
And, well, the follow-up on that is, how has the mission evolved over the last few years? I know when Howard launched it here in Seattle, and then he went down to San Francisco to give the same speech, he said that they were going to focus on local candidates.
Right.
But you've also been working on issue campaigns. So when did that come about, and how did it work?
Yeah, great question. So, yeah, the original mission, the two biggest pillars between the original mission when Governor Dean launched us was that we were going to be supporting candidates up and down the ballot in all 50 states. So the original 50-state strategy, the idea that no vote should go uncontested. We should have a candidate in every election, in every city, in every state for that stands up for real values, because you can't. Democrats, progressives can't win if they don't even run and they don't try to get people's votes. So that was number one. The second main principle was that we were going to train people all over the country how to do the best job possible. Train them in the skills to win so they can be better than just volunteers. They can be super volunteers. They can be the change makers that actually deliver real victory. So you're right. Those were the two sort of founding principles. And as things went along, we found that it was also vitally important that we pushed issues. That one of the key things about issues is that issues is what often connects people from state to state, from location to location. The bottom line is that you live in Washington State, so it's really easy potentially for Democracy for America to pitch you to be involved and interested in, say, the Seattle City Council or certainly one of the statewide Senate races. But it isn't always easy to get you to care about other really important races around the country. So, for example, you mentioned early on our battle with supporting Ned Lamont against Joe Lieberman. That was easy because Joe Lieberman was this unifying force that made it really easy to create a villain, because he was such a villain that everybody nationally understood. But when you go to somebody like Al Wynn in Maryland, which is one of the other controversial endorsements we made, that was Donna Edwards' race, and we won it with Donna Edwards. But nobody knew who Donna Edwards was. In fact, nobody even knew who Al Wynn was. And the way in which we were able to get people outside of Maryland to really care about that race was by connecting it to the issues, by connecting it to what would be done, what the reforms were that Donna could do, and what were the bad things that Al Wynn was doing. And so issues become a vitally important part of the connective tissue that makes it so that we're a community that actually cares about that has a reason to care about candidates for school board in Kentucky, even if you live in Arizona.
One of the things that's going on right now that I'm seeing questions on it in the chat, I actually saw them earlier today, was the issues with the school board and what's happening with the schools in Chicago. Are you guys aware and watching that?
Absolutely. Chicago has been a major emphasis for us this year. We had a shot to take Rahm Emanuel out from the mayor position. And, it's interesting, going into this election, Rahm Emanuel had this attitude of, I'm unstoppable, and in fact, I'm so unstoppable, I'm going to destroy progressives that have fought me in this city in this election. And so what he did is they had some initiatives on the ballot that were progressive that he wanted to defeat. And then he also took the 7 progressive aldermen, that's what they call city council members in Chicago, and actually redistricted them out of their districts so they would have an extremely hard time getting reelected. And then he raised money into a massive super PAC that spent literally millions of dollars outspending a lot of these city council members by 4 to 1, 5 to 1, in trying to defeat him. They thought for sure that Rahm Emanuel was going to win. Everybody in Chicago thought he was going to come out ahead. And what's really exciting about what happened is that with the work of DFA and coalition members, Working Families Party, Move On, but this part of it was really, really led by DFA because those groups largely focused on the mayor's race. We focused on defending those 7 progressive aldermen. And the great news, Chad, is that our work was fantastic and we won. We won every single one of those races. We sent all 7 of those progressive aldermen right back to the city council. And now, not only did we succeed in defeating Rahm Emanuel from throwing them out, we completely defeated his power in the city council because it has empowered anyone in the city council who before was afraid of upsetting Rahm. Now they're not afraid of him anymore. And then the second victory, of course, is that we sent Rahm Emanuel into the first runoff in Chicago mayor history. Now, he ended up winning that, but just sending him into the runoff alone has its own victory in continuing to stop his agenda dead in its tracks.
Great.
Now, that said, that doesn't mean that we don't continue to have fights. And there's no question that there are a lot of corporate Democrats. There's a lot of money and special interests involved in for-profit schooling, and they are pushing very hard to destroy our schooling systems actually around the country. And Chicago is a microcosm for that. So that fight continues, and it continues to this day, and isn't going to go away until we win.
It's not going to go away, indeed. And so what you're talking about is honestly the level of progressive involvement that we do need to see, because what Rahm Emanuel was doing is saying Chicago is a castle, and I am defending my castle within this little kingdom, and I'm not worried about anybody from outside of the area coming in and spoiling up my throne room. Okay, and what you showed him, and what we are going to show candidates all over, and mayors and governors, like what you did in Wisconsin and Ohio, is there are no throne rooms anymore, and this movement is national. No matter what you do, no matter where you are, we are watching you, and we are going to do something to stop you from hurting the people that we care about, our communities.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, look, we're not going to win them all. They're not going to win everything they go after either. That's politics. And some of these fights, you have to fight more than once. When you've got business against you, they have a bottom line corporate interest to continue to fight over and over again. And so they will. Well, we need to fight too. And the key is to make sure that we don't fight only from a defensive posture. And that's one of the key things that we both work with candidates to try to get them to be as proactive as possible, but is also part of our issue advocacy. A great example of this is that for the last 15 years, serious, people to prove that they were serious in Washington, they had to be willing to put cuts to Social Security on the table. They had to say, that should be on the table. That proves so that was the moderate centrist position. And in fact, no cuts was sort of considered the progressive position. Well, we got sick of that, and we realized that it was time for us to go on offense, and that if we did so, that we could probably move the Overton window and make it so that, that it changed the game. And only 2 years later, that's exactly what's happened. Now, the progressive position is to expand Social Security, scrap the cap, and expand benefits. And the centrist position is no cuts. And nobody on the Democratic side, and nobody that matters on the Democratic side, is even talking about putting Social Security and cuts to Social Security on the table. That's an example of when we push progressive forward in a proactive way, progressive vision forward, we win, and we win much longer in the long term. It's a much harder fight now to cut Social Security. And we need to do that in education as well. And that's one of the things we're working on now. And in fact, feedback from members as to what they're looking for, is what are the real, truly progressive proposals that we need to push in education that can start to put us on offense instead of only being on defense.
Cool. So let's go on to the question 3 here. Bernie Sanders has a thing against political action committees. And what he focuses on is he doesn't want a super PAC, and he doesn't have one. But Democracy for America is a political action committee. So how do you work with federal candidates? Because I know that I don't know all of the details there, but how does that work? And let's talk about you guys being a PAC.
Yeah, you bet. And we've actually worked quite a bit with Bernie Sanders. So when Bernie goes off against political action committees, I think there's a couple ways it's important to keep in mind. The issue with super PACs is that super PACs have literally they can take any amount of money. So you can give $1 million. You could technically give $1 billion to a super PAC. So there's no limits, which means you're dramatically increasing the power. For the more money you have, the more power you have. Secondly, super PACs, that information, there's no transparency. Who gives doesn't have to be disclosed. So, in fact, in some super PACs, you could even be getting money from foreign countries or from corporations that aren't allowed in other places. So when Bernie goes off against PACs, he's really mostly talking about super PACs. Now, the other angle in which he's going off against PACs is actually more, he's just going off on money and politics, on the entire system. I mean, Bernie supports, having a publicly financed system which would take money out of politics completely. And if you did that, then you wouldn't need to have PACs like us, because you wouldn't need to have people out there trying to create a special interest for the grassroots, advocating for them and trying to move things forward, because it'll be a completely different system that isn't based on money and funding. So,
right. But specifically with DFA, how do you guys get your funding?
So our funding comes in from small dollar donors, and in fact, there's limits to how much money people can give us, which is, and it all is transparent. We have to tell the FEC, and then it becomes public knowledge on places like Open Secrets, exactly who gives us money and how much they give us. So we're transparent, and there's limits. The interesting thing is the limits are that people can only give up to $5,000 a year to us. That's a lot of money, though. What I think you'll find interesting is that 90% of our funding comes in at $100 or less, which is very similar to Bernie's campaign. Because we're funded by grassroots donors, by real people that actually care, literally mom and pops, grandmas scraping pennies together because they care about political activity. They want to elect really good progressives. College kids that throw $10 our way instead of buying that Starbucks or going to see a movie, and then legitimate. Typical people that also donate. We get a few that give us larger sums, which is great. But we survive off of the small donors that give us $100 or less.
And it's not just donations that you ask of them. I mean, you're asking for active members who are
That's
active
right.
in their local groups, as well as just sending the national group some money.
That's right. We work really hard to empower our members, and there's a lot of ways in which we empower them. From everything from actions on issues and candidates, like helping to set up things like door knocking or making phone calls. We do a call out the vote program every year for the elections and generate literally millions of phone calls to targeted voters in targeted districts to try to get out the vote. So we really try to make it possible for people to be active. And we support local groups. In our heyday, in our biggest time period, when we were right off of the presidential campaign, we had about 800 groups around the country. There was only one other group that existed at the time on the web, and that was Move On. Since then, over the years, that's definitely decreased, especially with the Obama campaign in 2008 that took a lot of our groups away as they became OFA groups supporting Obama. And so that's gotten less and less. And I would say now we have several dozen groups that are active and coordinated around the country that do great work. And then I would say we have about a dozen that are super powerful, that really have a really strong base of people that are still active. That's groups like our Northside DFA in Chicago. That's Democracy for New York City in New York. DC for Democracy in DC, Philly for Change in Philadelphia. So there are, you can see that a lot of those are in major cities, but there are still many groups that are their own specific localized powerhouses, and we don't tell them what to do. They're bottom up. They do what they want. We just support them.
So I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because one of the reasons why I think you've seen a drop-off is Howard Dean's original mission. When he launched it, one of the things that he wanted to do was to get progressives a little more acclimated with the idea of being in a political structure, being in an organization. And then when he became the DNC chair, one of the things that he did is encourage progressives that were in his local groups to become part of the local Democratic Party as well, and take that change inside the Democratic Party. I know here in Washington, in 2007 and 2008, we saw a huge drop-off of actual members, actually engaged people, and we contacted a few of them to find out why, and they said, we've been elected as chair of our local district, we just don't have time for DFA anymore.
So we used to internally refer to that as the DFA Cliff. We would joke that we did such a great job of empowering people up the activist ladder that they'd get to the top and then they'd fall off of DFA, because what would happen is they would run for office and get elected, or they'd run for a party committee and get elected. And either way, that meant that they were too busy doing direct change within the party or in the government to be able to do the volunteer work on the outside, which is why it's so important that as an organization that we continue to focus on recruitment, bringing new people in. And that's another argument, Chad, for why we also work on issues. Issues are a really fantastic gateway to bringing new people in, often better than candidates. That said, sometimes you have fantastic candidates that are great at bringing new people in, and that's one of the exciting things about what Bernie's doing. If you look at this work around the country, there are so many people that have either been disenfranchised for years or never involved ever before that are getting inspired by and excited by what Bernie's doing and looking for ways to get involved, and that's exciting. And I'm confident that we're going to be able to help Bernie turn that into real action, whether it's when he's president or if that's when he continues to be in the Senate. Either way, I'm confident we're going to be able to turn a lot of that new energy into new boots on the ground that really can do real work with the right attitude and the right message and the right mission.
And that's exactly the political revolution that we need. So if people were going to be getting involved in DFA, what tools do you have? Specifically, what infrastructure tools do you have in place, and how can grassroots activists that are engaging in the process take advantage of them? I know you mentioned groups, but you didn't say it as a way or as the actual infrastructure on your website. And then also, why don't you talk a little bit about the training materials and training opportunities that you have for people just wanting to get involved?
Great question. So there's a number of ways in which we support members. One thing is that we have a very responsive and open staff. Unlike a lot of online web organizations, we're very accessible. Our phone numbers are on the website. We have emails. We read our info account. You can figure out our email addresses pretty well. It's our first initial and our last name at democracyforamerica.com. So you can pretty much reach anybody on staff just by emailing them directly. You can call our office. So one of the ways in which we empower is that people literally just reach out to us and say, hey, we need your help with this or with that. And then we do it as much as we can. Not unlike, to a certain extent, like you reaching out to me to say, hey, can you come on this show? I definitely want to do that to help empower you and support the work you're doing, because I think what you're doing is fantastic. And we try to do that as often as we can around the country. So that's one way. The training is a really, really key thing, and we do training all over the country, and we go to places that nobody else goes. The Democratic Party leaves behind even the great training places like Wellstone. They don't go to places like Alabama or Texas or Louisiana and train people. They don't do that. We do. And in fact, one of the things that's really exciting we find is that we'll go to Alabama and we'll have 250 people show up. And they're like, they'll see neighbors and friends at the training, and they're like, holy crap, I didn't even know you were a progressive or a Democrat. I thought I was the only Democrat in my neighborhood. So it's really exciting when we create that community and bring people together, and people are starving for it. They're like, why did you leave us alone? We need this work. We need this help. So we love doing that. That's part of how we empower. And almost everything that we train on the ground is also available online. And we have, in fact, in some cases, we have even more training available online through our night school program, where you can be trained an hour-long training on a specific tactic or a specific idea, like how to talk to the media, how to hold a press conference, or how to hold a great meeting to recruit people to knock on doors, that kind of thing. So training is a second thing. Third thing is we do encourage our members to form groups and to work together as a team. And sometimes that is simply things like helping them just coordinate to do one single event. A great example of this would be last week, 207 events trying to pass the Iran deal and opposing a war with Iran that we did around the country. Over 7,500 people involved in these events. And we helped organize them by supporting those members. I mean, coalition partners also helped because that was a coalition campaign. But we helped support these local members to get together. And so in some places, 5 people got together. Some places, 100 people got together. But then a key component of that is that we try to increase them to continue to stay together and be active together. You met this time. The 25 of you met this time and held a great press conference. Now let's meet. Now let's do another action. Let's do 3 weeks from now. Let's get together and do a rally, or let's do knock on doors, or let's make phone calls. So that's one of the key ways in which we can help create new groups and support groups to do things. And then the final way is, of groups, I would say, is we do encourage them to actually structure themselves with leadership, with people taking on real roles, because when people do that, then a local organization can much better create a mission for itself and actually give people a reason why to start coming to their meetings and get involved and do work with them, because it becomes clear there's a leader, there's a support system, there's people that are really involved that are doing that. And we try to support that as much as we can, sometimes with money, sometimes it's with staff support, sometimes it's by sending them training information or by going and doing a training, those kinds of things.
So one of the first things that Bernie 2016 TV did just purely on our own is we went to the Bernie Sanders website and we looked at Event Central, which is what he's using and the infrastructure that he's using to organize all of his events. And we thought the interface was easy, but maybe a little complicated. So we created a really quick video just going through how to create an event. I might recommend that DFA do something similar on how to create a group, how to manage a group infrastructure on your website, and I'd be willing to help with that if you want. That and just to showing what just to show what kind of trainings you've got. I'd love to be able to help you with something like that. Make this a two-way trade.
I love that.
So we're about a half hour in, and I wanted to move into some questions. The first one that I got on Facebook yesterday was from Linda, and she wanted to know what you think of Donald Trump. And let's expand that out. What do you think of the GOP field?
Oh boy, man. Well, it's definitely a crazy clown car of nutcases. We really have a pretty scary batch of Republicans running. It's almost impossible to come up with anything good that you could say about any of these candidates. It's amazing. Every one of them has something that makes them frightening. The funny thing is that when this whole thing started, I thought the one that I was most afraid of is Scott Walker, because I felt that he was the scariest match of crazy and electable. But Trump has outsold them all. I don't know if he's actually electable, but he sure as heck is winning these polls. And I will say that I think that one of the reasons why that's true actually has a little bit of similarity with Bernie Sanders, and that is that Americans are really sick and tired of scripted, overly thought out, non-authentic politicians. And I think part of what people like about Trump is that they can tell that he is just speaking from his heart. His heart may be a black heart, but he's speaking from his heart. He's being authentic. He's talking about what he really believes in, and he's not working from a script. And what I think is interesting is that is definitely also part of Bernie's appeal. Bernie is not working from a script. He's working from his beliefs. He's working from real solutions that he thinks that will actually make a change. And so while he's relentlessly on message, he doesn't sound fake. He's authentic. He's real. And so I think that's also part of the reason why Bernie is really taken fire, and part of why he continues to confound, the Democratic establishment that is, so believes that you got to be too scripted, you got to poll test everything, and you never take a risk you don't need to take. Well, Bernie doesn't do that. I would say that Donald Trump has some of that going for him too, and I think that's part of the reason why he's the front runner right now on the Republican side.
Yeah, I know that's why he's getting a whole lot of support. I really have to question whether that's going to actually result in votes in the Iowa caucus or the New Hampshire primary or any place else. There's a big difference between media support and polling and actual votes on the ground during the primary season. The one thing that I wanted to say about something that you said is he is very scary. The entire field is very scary. But I'm not just talking about scary from the perspective of a progressive. He's scary. They're all scary from the perspective of an American.
Yes,
I mean, we're
absolutely.
talking core American values and core American infrastructure, not just our roads and bridges, but our social infrastructure, our political infrastructure, all of this. It seems like none of our foreign policy, anything that you can name, this entire GOP field seems to be focused on tearing it all down and replacing it with something that I don't even recognize as our country. That's right.
That's right. You can't forget that every single one of these Republican nominees wanted to go to war with Iran rather than approve this deal. Every single one of these guys wants to kick Mexican immigrants out, or all immigrants out. They don't care about families in this respect. They like to give lots of lip service, but every single one of them would rather split families up than allow an undocumented worker that's been here for 20 years to stay. You go down the list of issue over and over again, and everything these guys are proposing. And it is pretty much all guys. I guess we have Carly and Fiona, but even her, every single one of them is out of touch with what the American people, not just what they need, but even what they want. And so it's really interesting to see how the Republican Party is imploding among itself. I'll tell you, Chad, I think the best case scenario for all of us is that Donald Trump comes in second in Iowa, second in New Hampshire, and it's just enough there that it makes it so he continues his campaign forever. And when he doesn't win the Republican nomination, he runs on his own. Because if we were to have
he has threatened that.
It's right. And if he ran as a third-party candidate and managed to split off all the racist votes, I mean, the reality is the Republican Party can't win without the racist vote. And if Trump can split the racist vote off for himself, then we got a real shot to make sure that no matter who our nominee is, we could win this thing.
Yeah. So we did have a question from the YouTube chat. Frederick Murphy is kind of wondering what your members might be. What was your stance, the DFA stance, on the Trade-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, and the sort of non-answer that we're getting from Hillary Clinton on this. It's bothered me a little bit, but then I'm a Bernie guy. From you guys who have not made an endorsement yet and maybe a little bit better at giving an official position, how do your members, or what kind of feedback are you getting about Hillary Clinton's stance on the TPP? Anything?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. Our members are rabidly opposed to the TPP and worked very, very hard to defeat it and played a huge role in the several small victories we had in postponing the fight. If you remember at the beginning of the year, the belief was that the one thing that was guaranteed to happen this year was that they were going to pass the TPP because it was the one thing that the president and the Republicans in Congress agreed on. And we managed to really, really put that in jeopardy. And let's be clear, even though they won their fast track vote, that they had a much, much harder fight to win than anybody predicted, The reality is that TPP is on the ropes right now. They don't have the deal that they want. People have walked away from the table, and the later it gets into the political season, the less likely that they're actually going to be able to pass it. So we still have a chance to beat this thing. And so to get to the Bernie and Hillary side of this, I think I mentioned that we've worked with Bernie a lot. One of the things we worked with him on this year was the fight against the TPP, where we did an educational phone call with our members. We called DFA Live. We did several petitions and petition deliveries. We did constituents meetings with members of Congress. We did a lot of media work. We were rabidly opposed to the TPP. We worked our butts off to try to defeat it, and we did that all alongside Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, and working directly with them. So absolutely, that's very clear where our position is. The TPP is a job-killing deal. It will hurt America. The sovereign issues, you name it, environmental. It's pretty much every single thing about this thing stinks. Now on Hillary's been very interesting on this, right? She's tried her best to play this on the center line. As part of the Obama administration, she negotiated large parts of the TPP. She said fantastic things about it while she was Secretary of State. Since she's been Secretary of State, in her book, Hard Choices, she did take a shot at one of the worst provisions in the TPP that would allow corporations to sue governments over laws that we have. For example, this happened because of one of the other trade deals. Philip Morris sued Brazil because of anti-smoking laws, and the tribunal that is created that's outside of a normal court system actually fined Brazil millions, actually I think billions of dollars. That was money that they were supposed to pay to Philip Morris because they cost that to Philip Morris's bottom line because they cared about their public safety. That's an absolute frickin' disaster, and that's exactly why we need to defeat the TPP. Well, the good thing is, you had Hillary Clinton in Hard Choices saying that's a problem, it needs to change, and later on she said that if she had the ability to vote no on fast track in the Senate, she would. That said, and I think that we need to be really clear here, she has not really taken a firm position on the TPP. She absolutely still needs pressure, and I am not confident that what we've heard from her has been, I think potentially has been more rhetoric than reality, especially when you consider how much time she spent in the administration working to negotiate the TPP from the first place, and her previous support for trade deals like NAFTA in the past. So we need to work really hard to hold Clinton's feet to the fire to make sure that if this TPP vote comes up again, that she stands up and leads the way, along with Bernie and all the rest of the great leaders that are in our Senate that are standing up, like Jeff Merkley and Elizabeth Warren, as I've said before, and others, to beat this thing.
So another question came in from Leo on Facebook, and he wanted to know about Get Out the Vote efforts and what you have learned, what DFA has learned about Get Out the Vote efforts in various parts of the country. Are they different in different parts of the country, or are there some constants that we can use anywhere?
Well, there are some differences depending on where you're in the country, because obviously some door knocking and stuff is harder to do in locations where people are massively spread out. But in some ways, getting people to the polls is even more important in those places, but you do it by car where you're literally driving people in. I would say two of the biggest things that we've learned through the years that are sort of universal everywhere. One is peer pressure. Nothing gets people to vote more than when friends say they've gone to vote and ask them, are you going to go vote? Or when friends vote together, or when they find out, when a voter finds out that others in their neighborhood are voting but they haven't voted. One of the test after test has shown that if you send people a card that shows in the last election this neighbor voted, but you didn't, that gets people to go, oh, I got to do my civic duty, I got to get out and vote. So those are some of sort of the more unique but also kind of cutting edge things that can be done. So anything that improves the peer pressure. We did a pretty cool Facebook thing, and that actually was cool enough in 2008 that I think it was, I've never heard this from Facebook, so I may be over crediting ourselves, but Facebook followed through in doing a version that was very similar to what we pushed in 2012 after we'd pushed it in 2008. That was fantastic. That helped create this peer-to-peer pressure to get people to go. And the second biggest thing that can be done, and this is something that we need to do all around the country, and that is making it very easy for people to vote at home. You know this from Washington. Voting at home dramatically increases voter turnout. I remember when they implemented it in Oregon. First off, one of the great studies, and I'm now going to, don't quote me on these exact numbers because I'm going to make them up, but they are really close to the real numbers. Okay, I just don't remember what the actual numbers were. But so, for example, if it was 24% higher turnout after the bill passed, the dirty little secret for progressives is that 17% of those were Democrats. So when we get people to vote at home, not only are we increasing voter participation significantly, we're also significantly increasing the turnout among progressives and Democrats across the board. So I really, really want to pressure that if you live in a state that doesn't have vote at home, you should be advocating for it. Or if you live in a state that has absentee balloting voting, you should take advantage of it. And a lot of states have that, and you should do it.
Yep. Well, we've got a number of other questions, but we only have about 10 minutes, and I wanted to give you plenty of time to respond to this one. So we may have to hold off on the other questions until the next time we do this, or maybe do a follow-up. But one of the things that DFA was involved in was Netroots Nation this year. And you had a situation where the Black Lives Matter activists took the stage, and they raised quite a ruckus. You posted a very powerful and articulate article to the DFA Leaders List about what lessons DFA has learned. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about what your reaction was to having the activists take the stage in Phoenix, and how have you worked as DFA to engage with Black Lives Matter, with the community, thanks to their giving us white liberals a good slapdown.
Yeah. Well, I want to, I think I should start by saying Black Lives Matter is a classic example of a decentralized movement where people are organically organizing together under a concept or a few policy concepts that they want. And what that means is that when you have a decentralized movement like Occupy Wall Street, or like, honestly, the beginnings of the Howard Dean campaign when DFA members started on their own, Dean for America members rather, started on their own organizing on Meetup, and the campaign was only focused on Iowa and New Hampshire at first, and suddenly all over the country, including like in Miami where I was from, we started organizing on our own. What that means when you do that is it means that not everything that people do are going to be, not everybody's going to agree on it. There's no one to hold accountable for poor choices, for non-strategic tactics. But it also means that you get an authentic movement. You get a movement that's really driven by real passion and real power. And I think that's what we're really seeing in the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's exciting. It does mean that occasionally they're going to do things that are uncomfortable, and occasionally they're going to piss off their own allies. And sometimes that'll be smart strategically, and sometimes it'll be a mistake. And that's where I think it leads us to Netroots Nation, where I want to say that was extremely smart. It went really well, and here's why it was so powerful. It was a forum that included Martin O'Malley, and then Bernie was coming on second. And they came out while Martin O'Malley was speaking, and Martin O'Malley had already flubbed some terrible answers, in my opinion, to questions on police brutality and especially on his leadership when he was the mayor of Baltimore. And I think basically what happened is that these organizers had had enough. And so they got up and they sort of a large group. It wasn't like 3 or 4 hecklers. It wasn't just 2 people like it was in Seattle. It was it was probably 24 people got up, marched up the stage, and they held basically a demonstration. They occupied the room. It was basically the political convention equivalent of shutting down a freeway. What they did is they shut down the whole event for an impromptu demonstration of their point. And their point was Sandra Bland had just been murdered or at least had died in her jail cell after being pulled over for not using a turn signal. These women were very upset because this is a classic. Sandra Bland was educated. She was going to a great job. She doesn't fit this stereotype, this Mike Brown stereotype they sell of the thug that is dangerous, that may have just robbed a store. She was on her way to a job. She is an educated woman, and she got pulled over for a taillight, and she's dead 3 days later. They have every right to be pissed off, to be upset, because Sandra Bland isn't alone. This happens all the time, way too often in America. And that's what they were demonstrating over. They got there, they said, say her name, say the name of the people that have died in police custody. And they made, they took turns, standing up and saying, the women got up on this chair and they would say, if I die in police custody, I did not commit suicide. I will never commit suicide. Then one got off, and the next one got up and said, if I die in police custody, tell my kids I did it for them. I'm trying to make a better future for them. Next person got up and said, if I die in police custody, I want you to burn this place down. It was extremely powerful. It was important, and it really meant something. And it was a way to hold the room that wasn't just standing around and chanting one slogan. It was a way to hold the room that engaged people and made you think and forced you to think, because they wouldn't move. And they would make their statement, and then they would give a chance for Martin O'Malley to answer, and then he would blow it, and they would come back with another version with the next step in the campaign. So it was really intense. And then Martin O'Malley got off the stage, and Bernie got on. And I'll tell you, it was disappointing. I really wanted to see Bernie, who I knew is the best candidate on this issue, who this should be right in his wheelhouse, came out, and he basically treated them like hecklers. He tried to ignore them. He tried to speak over them. Ironically, he was there saying, we need a revolution in this country, while a revolution was standing right next to him begging for his help. And so that was very frustrating, and it was hard. What's exciting to see is I think that it worked. It really woke a lot of people up, including Bernie, and made it so that Bernie has got a better platform now than he had before when it comes to issues of taking on structural racism in this country and demilitarizing our police. He was already there, but the new program's better. The criminal justice reform, getting rid of getting rid of mandatory sentencing and the mass incarceration we do in this country. He has done such a better job since then. So even Bernie alone is a great example of what Black Lives Matter has done. But they've done it with more than Bernie, and that's the key. They've made this become part of the national dialogue. They've made it be something that we're all discussing. And the reality is we need to talk about it, because we do live in a society that is white-led, and white-led in such a way that impacts people of color constantly, consistently throughout this country in an unequal, very negative fashion, and especially for black people who are seeing themselves die over and over again in communities around this country for things like shopping in a store or pulling over for without putting on their turn signal.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you, Charles. We've hit about an hour, and we want to continue this later, but we wanted to keep this show to an hour. I definitely will be on the phone with you or on Hangouts again later. This has been a great conversation and a great start to this series. To
Thanks so
everybody
much for having
who's
me,
watching,
Chad.
You bet. Glad to have you on. And I know that DFA has about 1 million members out there, so I know that your team has already shared the fact that we had this conversation on Facebook, and I'm looking forward to the next one, and looking forward to seeing DFA very active in 2015 and 2016.
Great, Chad. And let me just leave with one last thing, which is that if you're out there, you support Bernie, work your butt off for him. He needs your support. He needs you to work as hard as you can to try to help him get elected, because that's how he'll win, and that's how he'll do things like win the endorsement of DFA members. And so I really want to encourage you, if that's who you support, do everything you can to help him win.
That's what we're doing. Cool. All right, and to everybody else, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. It will continue. DFA, while only about 12 years old, has already proven itself to be a major player in the identification, the encouragement, and the election of progressive candidates all over the country at every level, like Charles said, from dog catcher to president. There are a lot of other organizations out there, and I hope to be able to bring them to you. If you have any suggestions, please let us know on our Facebook page, on our Twitter account. If you are a member or a leader in an organization and you would like to go onto a hangout like this, get in touch, and I'll put you on my list. Not a problem. If you have questions that we didn't cover or comments about this, this show will be going from a live version to an archived version, and you'll be able to watch it, and we'll be watching the comments. So please post those questions and comments below on the comment section. And like Charles says, we have a lot of work to do to rebuild this democracy, but we can do it. Like Bernie says, by working together, we can do anything. So let's stand together. Thanks, everybody. And John, you can cut. Thank you much.
Well, thanks, Chad. I think I'll do that.